Tani kam nderin që të prezentoj bashkëshortën e ish kongresistit DioGuardi, Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi, e cila ka qenë dhe është e lindur dhe e rritur në New Jersey, mban master degree, është zëdhënëse e Ligës Qytetare Shqiptare Amerikane. Ka qenë që në vitet 1994 e këndej dore djathtë e DioGuardi ka organizuar shumë seminare, shumë takime, intervista, ka kërkuar dosje, dokumentacione për të provuar vërtetësinë dhe situatën reale të shqiptarëve në trojet shqiptare. Pra, do të me duhet një kohë shumë e gjatë për të paraqitur veprimtarinë dhe angazhimin e saj në Ligën Qytetare Shqiptare Amerikane. Unë mund të them se edhe pse nuk është për nga origjina shqiptare, kjo mund të krahasohet me një shqiptare patriote në nivelin më të lartë intelektuale për veprimtarinë e saj, dhe po ashtu në emrin tim dhe në emrin tuaj, njëkohësisht dhe i falenderojemi për angazhimin e saj, dhe cila thotë dhe premton se nuk do të ndalë këtu. Pra kam nderin dhe kënaqësinë që përpara jush të prezantoj zonjën e nderuar Shirley Cloyes DioGuardi. Ju lutem një dorë trokitje.
Mia Brahma, thank you so much for inviting Joe and me back to Michigan. We haven't been here for something like 14 years. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Marish, thank you so much. Marish Nutsulai, member of our board for 20 years, has so much to do with what happened tonight, making this possible, along with the entire committee. And I want to thank everyone who's present here for their support. Now, Joe has told you a lot about what happened to him, what brought him into his whole experience as an Albanian. I'm going to fast forward a bit to the 20th and 21st century, so I'm not going to go back. We're going to go forward in what I have to say, and I want to start with the fact that Arben Jaferi, the late Arben Jaferi, Albanian leader in Macedonia, said something extremely important. He said that Joe DioGuardi and the Albanian American Civic League reignited the search to solve the Albanian national cause, reopened the effort to resolve the Albanian national cause in the 20th century. And of course, now we're in the 21st. Many of you don't know me in this room, even if you've read something that I've written or seen me give a speech before Congress. I'm not an Albanian, as you know. My father's family came into what was then called the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1644. How did I come to understand what the Albanian experience was about? I was influenced deeply as a child by what was happening or what had happened during the Nazi Holocaust. And as a publisher, later, having been influenced by that, I became involved in struggles to overcome oppression and free people around the world. And right before I became involved in the Albanian issue, especially what was happening to the Palestinians under Israeli occupation. And as an adult and as a book publisher, I was specializing in domestic and international politics. And so when Slobodan Milosevic came to power and the Bosnian War began, I knew we were seeing the return of Hitler in our time. Americans, you were among them at that time. Some of you, not everybody. And some of you were escaping. Americans were watching images on our television screens of genocide in Bosnia and later the concealing of the concentration camps there at the hands of what? The Serbian military and paramilitary. And we were told this isn't our war. Oh no, this has nothing to do with us. This is a quagmire. We can't get trapped in it. These people have been fighting for centuries. It's interethnic hatred in the Balkans. It's almost genetic. I was absolutely appalled. And I made the decision at that point that I was going to publish a book from the perspective of the anti-Milosevic, anti-war opposition inside the former Yugoslavia. And most of those people, by the way, were journalists. While I was completing that book at the end of 1993, I met Joe DioGuardi. And I met members of the Albanian American Civic League. And think about it. I learned about the Albanian dimension of the Balkan conflict for the first time in 1993. And when I had met Joe and the Civic League, I was just learning then about a place called Kosovo. So, think about it. I was an American who'd spent 15 years publishing books on international issues of importance. And I wasn't aware of the Albanian dimension. So, how many Americans were? Until I met Joe and the Civic League, I didn't know that it was their work that had driven Milosevic out of Kosovo and into Bosnia, and I didn't know then that Milosevic had every intention of returning to Kosovo. Now, as we all know, in February of 1998, the KLA would come to the defense of Kosovars when the Serbs attacked Granica, pillaged and plundered their way across Kosovo, killing more than 12,000 Kosovars eventually and driving out more than 1 million. Now, the Albanian community worldwide would like to credit former President Bill Clinton with dropping the bombs on Serbia. But the bombs would never have been dropped, and Milosevic's genocidal march across Europe would not have been halted if it had not been for the following. then Senator Joe Biden, chair of the House Committee, or the Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs, then 34 Jewish members of the House and Senate, and the Albanian American Civic League. Why am I talking about this? This is why it's so important then and now to have a lobby for Albanian issues, have Albanian issues before key leaders in the West, and why it's so important for all of you and all Albanian Americans, in my opinion, to become deeply engaged in the U.S. political structures. It's very, very difficult, I think you all know, to get the attention of any president. And the U.S. government today, even more so, because there's so many other issues. All of you know what's happening in the Middle East. All of you know what's happening with the flight of refugees all over Europe. So, we have to be able to make our case. We're not a sociata. We're not involved in humanitarian activities. We're not involved in culture. We're not involved in education. All of those are wonderful things for the Albanian American community to do, but it's absolutely essential. It was essential then, it's essential now that we have a lobby. As then Senator Joe Biden said in a speech in 2002 in Chicago, the problem doesn't lie with any person or institution in our country, because being Albanian, if they are anti-Albanian, if they're against engagement, with the U.S. foreign policy, it's not because they may realize that, understand what they're about. The problem lies when America has a focus elsewhere, when it leaves Albanian and Balkan issues behind it. And at that time, by the way, when Biden spoke, he cautioned all of us. He said, keep the spotlight on the issues. And he praised the Civic League specifically for doing that. And there are three things that he talked about that we know very much about, and that I want to let you know, if you haven't thought about this, that what this consists of, having a lobby consists of, is raising funds for people to support members of Congress, absolutely essential. Building a constituency, that means Albanian Americans have to be willing to speak out. And then, probably more important than anything, marshaling the facts, presenting the case that will gain the attention of the U.S. Congress. That's what people like Biden, like Lantos, like Hyde, like Rohrbacher have definitely acknowledged the Civic League for accomplishing. Biden appealed, and look how many years ago, We were only in Detroit a year later. He appealed for all of us to come together, and I believe Albanian Americans have a unique opportunity and responsibility to do this. I know that some of you in this room, especially those of you from Montenegro, how many people, by the way, let me do a little focus group activity. Raise your hand if your family was originally from Montenegro. Can I see? A lot of you here, right? All of you know about the Tusi 14 who were jailed in Montenegro, ultimately spending 3 years. It's Albania, yes, it's all Albanian lands, but we're going to have to talk about it this way, excuse me, because we had somebody called Jukanovic. He's still there. We could go on and on. It was the Albanian American Civic League that took all of the things that we had accomplished from the time Joe was in Congress all the way through the Kosovo War, and we got the leaders to go to Jukanovic. We got at least 6 members of Congress to begin to take on our Congress. And it didn't ultimately succeed, as you know. 4 Albanian Americans had to spend 3 years in jail. But during the same period, I also want you to know that there were, and I don't know whether anyone in this room was part of it, there were many people in the Albanian American community saying, oh, Joe and Shirley, oh, Civic League, why aren't you at the rallies in front of the UN? By the way, speaking the universal language of Albanian, why aren't you in front of the Capitol in Washington, D.C.? And I'll tell you why. Because, unfortunately, it wasn't going to matter. People may feel good when they come out and protest, and they may feel that they're sending a message back home to relatives, to families and communities. But unless you have a lobby, an active one, and unless you support that can make the case to members of Congress about the Albanian dimension in the Balkans, about what was happening in that moment when people were tortured and jailed and arrested and kept in jail in Montenegro, in Podgorica, unless you have that, the rally will have no meaning. It's impossible, by the way, tonight to reflect a lot more on the 25 years of the Civic League's actions, because you've heard a lot about it. But I'm going to state just a couple of things I think you know that you may not know. The Civic League was the first organization to publicly recognize and support Učića. How many of you knew it? When we learned about a hearing, Joe and I, that was being planned in the U.S. Congress in 1998, we knew in February. We knew it was going to focus on Bosnia. Right away, because of our connections to the U.S. Congress, we went right to then Chairman Gilman, House Foreign Affairs Committee. We went right to the Democratic side, and we said, you can't have this hearing only on Bosnia. Be sure to have this hearing about Kosovo. Do you all remember when Gelbard of our State Department in that period had given Milosevic a green light by saying Učića was a terrorist organization? How many of you remember that? Do you remember that when that happened? Okay. We went and told them. And how did we manage to do that? Because I had the experience of watching what happened to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They failed to state their case, and they were criminalized. I knew that if Učića was criminalized when it should not be, the guns would not move in to Kosovo and everyone would die. We also knew that the State Department had not called Učića a terrorist organization. So, what happened at that hearing? Gelbard gets on the stand, and the next thing we know, one member after another begins to question him. And he had to back off. He said, no, actually, no, the State Department hasn't done this. What happened the next day? Overnight, every major media organization in the United States announced that Učića wasn't a terrorist organization. And with that, The guns flowed in a way that they could never flow into Bosnia, and thank God, only 12,000 were killed before NATO stepped in. Thank God. A few more things. Extraditing Milosevic to The Hague. I worked with the lawyers who wrote that document. Milosevic was sent to The Hague. You saw tonight, you saw that excellent picture of Milosevic speaking about how Joe DioGuardi in the Civic League, he said, Satanized him in the minds of American people. What you don't know was that I was asked to respond to, by the ICTY, to respond to the first 3 days of his entire testimony, and with that, Joe and I went off to The Hague to make the case. Some of you know we defended Fatmir Limaj and Ramesh Haradinaj. Why do I want to say that? Not because we were best friends. I didn't even know Fatmir Limaj. But we knew Kosovo was on trial. I wrote an article with that title. We knew Kosovo was on trial, and we had to be sure that the Albanian perspective would prevail and that they would be freed. You know about, of course, the independence of Kosovo. I wish it were completely independent. It's really independent in name only. But the Civic League was responsible for 99% of all hearings and resolutions on the Albanian issue from the time that Joe was in Congress until 2008. And I want to mention just 2 hearings of importance, and one involved Dom Nua's brother, because we did this incredible hearing in 2005 where Bishop Sopi, Dom Luce-Georgi, I was a witness, and Ardian Gini spoke before the House, and the whole issue was saying, look, you know, here you have Roman Catholic leaders that are Albanian. How many, again, American officials even know that Albanians are 4 religions living side by side in harmony for centuries? So what happens at this hearing is that Dana Rohrabacher, who now, by the way, is chairman of the Subcommittee on Europe, turned to Henry Hyde, who was then the chair, and said, Mr. Chairman, you've just heard Bishop Sopi speaking, and Bishop Sopi apparently has absolutely no problems whatsoever living in a Muslim majority society. So, if Bishop Sopi has no problem, why do we Americans have a problem? Why does the West have a problem? Why do we believe in the Serbian statement that Albanians are a potential terrorist Muslim force in the heart of Europe? Believe me, that hearing was crucial. That day, everything began to change. That's what led to George Bush finally recognizing the independence of Kosovo. And there was another hearing in 2005 that was equally important, and that was standards before status. I don't know whether you remember that. And it was a ridiculous concept. It was made to delay independence altogether. And Tom Lantos got up and said, excuse me to everyone, as far as I'm concerned, if America had to meet standards before status, we would still be run by the British. Again, another crucial factor. Opening of the University of Titova. I think you know that story. We led the way. Montenegro, extremely important, extremely important. Think about it, and people, I think, sometimes don't have enough appreciation for this. Lantos, Tom Lantos, we brought him, I think you know, initially, the first U.S. official to ever visit only Albanian lands in Montenegro. And yes, it's all Albanian. Only one. Marcia Sulai was part of that. Joe and I, of course, were. I designed that entire trip, and we traveled all over Albanian lands. And Anton Lajci was one of the people, because what we did, we chose people from each Albanian region in Montenegro to choose people on the ground who could educate, again, which is what the Civic League does, educate a leading member of Congress. Right after that, I wrote a piece called Montenegro, an Apartheid State in the Heart of Europe, about that trip. And with that, you should know that key people in the Center for, let's see, CSIS, which is connected to our CIA, and some people in our universities immediately went to Lantos to try to attack me and discredit the entire trip to Montenegro. And of course, Lantos didn't buy into that, didn't succeed. Later, we took Congressman Rohrabacher. We went to Tuzi at a critical time when the issue of the commune was being dealt with. The Preševa Valley, Fatan Bislimi has already told what we've been doing. And also Joe has already told you about the whole process of revealing the unique role that Albanians played in saving Jews during the Holocaust. And I want to end with this. We are now, and I'm sorry to have to be the person who has to make this statement tonight, but I think, you know, we need to. Joe has said all of the wonderful things about being Albanian. And he's very right to say what he said. But we also have to acknowledge we're in a dangerous time again. Things are disintegrating in the Balkans. We have to remember that during the war, it was a very brief period when the spotlight shone on the Albanian history, 150 years of arrest, torture, imprisonment, expulsion, and genocide. When the international community saw Albanians being moved in cattle cars, what did that remind them of? Nazi Germany. But very quickly, after the war ended, the spotlight began to fade. The Serbian propaganda machine rose up and worked consistently together, totally united, to create a false parity between the victims, the Albanian and Bosnian victims of the war, and the perpetrators. And I'm sorry to say they have succeeded greatly. So now the time has arrived. And I have to tell you, in my opinion, there's nothing else to do but work with what a lobby is about. The battlefield for a short period of time was a battlefield requiring weapons, requiring us to be on the ground. But now, as it really always has been, the battlefield is in the press and the parliaments of the world. And you have a choice to make. We have to remember, we have something very powerful. We have Besa. We have Besa. Everyone in this room knows what it is. We have a history that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years of religious tolerance. Roman Catholics, Orthodox Christians, Muslims, and Jews living side by side in harmony for centuries. We have Albanians who never initiated war in the Balkans. This is something that no one can take away from anyone here and anyone in Southeast Europe unless you let them. So I welcome you, I hope I can welcome you into the next part of the 21st century. I hope it's going to be an Albanian century. I hope it's going to be a moment when we really combine all of our resources and all of our energies and really, really finally resolve the national cause. Parliamentarian.
Thank you, Mrs. Shirley Cloyes, DioGuardi. Thank you.